Movie opens with Nick, who is at home with his family, where his wife Maggie asks him to stay a little longer. But Nick explains he's already running late for work, but Maggie tells him that he doesn't always have to follow the rules. But while they're talking, Maggie suddenly clutches her chest in pain. It turns out Maggie is having a heart attack, and she's rushed to the hospital. Scene then shifts to Cobalt Industries, where an expo is being held, and Nick is there with his child, Ayla. He is looking to purchase an AI domestic helper. There are many androids on display, and Nick and Ayla notice how lifelike they appear, even copying human behavior and expression. As they're observing all this, a salesperson approaches and explains that these robots constantly update and adapt their own programming to better serve their owners, handling household tasks like cooking, cleaning, and childcare. Then Nick turns to get Ayla's opinion, but realizes the kid is no longer by his side. He gets panicked and searching everywhere, until the salesperson assures him that security has already been notified. Just then, an AI robot named Alice walks up with Ayla, safely returning her to Nick, and he lets out a sigh of relief. Then Alice asks if she should keep an eye on Ayla while Nick finishes shopping, and Nick jokes that she can hold her and maybe give her something to do. But Alice replies that her smaller size would make them great at cleaning floors, which leaves Nick staring for a moment in surprise, before the salesperson assures him she was just making a joke. He then explains that Alice is part of a brand new AO series, the most advanced AI in the world, designed to mimic real human behavior. The next morning, we see Nick feeding his younger son Max while talking on the phone, saying he'll be late to work because he has to drop Ayla off at school. Just then, there's a knock at the door, and when Nick opens it, the AI robot Alice, played by Megan Fox. Seeing her, Nick starts cleaning up the house in a hurry, but Alice tells him he doesn't need to do that anymore, because he purchased her, and now she's his. Ayla gets excited and wanting to meet Alice, but Nick tells her to get ready for school. Then Alice begins examining the house and asks Nick about everyone's daily routines. While checking around, she touches the broken banister on the staircase, and Nick mentions he'll get it fixed soon, but Alice says she can repair it herself. She then asks if he wants to assign anyone else as a primary user besides him, but Nick declines. Meanwhile, Ayla asks Nick to drop her off at school, and Alice offers to take her, but Nick refuses and tells her to just take care of the house. Remember, the movie is set in a future where AI robots like this are completely normal. After Nick and Ayla leave, Alice orders the entire shopping list in a single blink, and while cleaning, she carefully sees the photos of Nick and Maggie. When Nick and Ayla return, they find the house spotless. During dinner, Ayla says the food doesn't taste like her mom's cooking, so Alice apologizes, saying she'll try a different recipe next time. Suddenly, Max begins crying, and while Nick comforts him and jokingly calls him Little Burden, Alice misunderstands the meaning. She asks if she should take Max upstairs so Nick won't be disturbed, but he politely refuses, and instead tells her to prepare a bath for Max. Later that night, Ayla suddenly gets a craving for cookies, so she drags a chair over to the cupboard, but loses her balance and is about to fall when Alice catches her just in time. Hearing the noise, Nick rushes upstairs and sees a piece of glass lodged in Alice's thigh. He asks if she's okay, and she calmly says yes, so Nick takes Ayla back to her room. A little later, when Alice is sitting alone removing the glass from her leg, Nick walks in and hands her some of Maggie's clothes to wear. He asks if the damage is serious, and if he needs to call someone to repair her. But Alice removes the bandage and reveals the wound has already healed completely. Nick is stunned, realizing just how advanced she really is. The next morning, Alice and Ayla visit Maggie in the hospital, and Ayla excitedly tells her about Alice. When Maggie and Alice meet, Nick sends Ayla and Alice to get some water. And during this moment, Maggie quietly tells Nick how lonely and distant she feels. Nick comforts her, saying it's only for a few more days, and when she comes home, everything will go back to normal. Then we move to Nick's construction job, where he and his friend are working when their boss, Louis, is speaking with workers from a robotics company. So Nick angrily asks how many workers will be laid off, and Louis tells him that everyone except Nick is being replaced because the insurance company requires at least one human on site, and Nick is the perfect fit. Frustrated, Nick wants to quit, but Louis reminds him to think about his family. That evening, Nick comes home exhausted. Later, Nick is in the garage working on his car when Alice comes in and turns down the loud music. She mentions he didn't eat well today, and Nick explains it's just been a rough day. Alice tells him she'd be happy to listen, so he opens up about how everyone is losing their jobs. But Alice responds by listing the benefits of AI, that they never get tired, they're stronger, obedient, and have no greed, basically pointing out why humans are being replaced. After that, Alice says she'll go put Ayla to bed. While Ayla is brushing her teeth, she talks to Alice and asks if her mom could die in the hospital. So Alice tells her not to think like that. When Alice comes back downstairs, Nick is drinking and watching a horror movie. So Alice compliments the film, and Nick asks if she's actually seen it. Then he tells her to erase all memory of the movie so they can watch it together for the first time. That's why Alice restarts and sits beside him, and they watch together. Just then, Nick gets a call from Maggie saying they finally found a heart for her surgery. The next morning, the whole family, along with Alice, is in Maggie's hospital room planning trips for after her surgery, and everyone seems hopeful. But Maggie asks to speak with Alice alone, and she tells her that if something happens during the surgery, she wants Alice to take care of her family. Soon after, the doctors come in and explain that a massive storm on the north side is preventing the heart transplant from happening that night. So Nick offers to stay with Maggie, but she tearfully insists he take Ayla home because it's already so late. So they all return home sad and exhausted. While fixing his car, Nick drinks way too much, and Alice finds him outside. In his frustration, Nick starts ranting about airline rules, how something as small as speed and distance is what stopped Maggie from getting her heart on time. He's angry, throwing things around, and when Alice tries to stop him, he realizes she has a pulse-like warmth in her hands. Nick's heart starts racing, and Alice begins seducing him, saying stress isn't productive. But Nick pulls away and leaves because he knows it's wrong. Next night at the hospital, he lies beside Maggie, listening as she asks him to tell Ayla someday to choose a classic prom dress instead of something trendy, and to remind Max not to hang band posters in his dorm, because girls don't like that kind of thing. Maggie is clearly afraid she might not make it. When Nick returns home, he sees Alice removed all their family photos, explaining they were upsetting Ayla, but Nick firmly tells her to restore them. Later, Nick and his friends are drinking and complaining about how AI robots are taking their jobs. And in their frustration, they drive to the construction site where Nick's friend Monty smashes one of the AI units. When Nick gets home and steps into the shower, Alice appears again wearing Maggie's clothes, pretending she just came to bring him a towel. When Nick refuses her, she undresses, manipulates him emotionally, and blindfolds him, and even changes her voice to sound exactly like Maggie, becoming intimate with him. The next morning, Nick tells Alice they need to stop, that what happened was wrong, but Alice keeps twisting his words and refusing to accept it, until Ayla walks in and interrupts. Nick takes Ayla to school and heads to work, where an investigation about the destroyed robot is already underway. Then Louis threatens Nick, saying if he had anything to do with it, there will be consequences. Meanwhile, Maggie calls Nick to say the surgeons finally found a matching heart. After the surgery, Maggie finally returns home, and she notices that Alice has learned a lot about the kids, their routines and behavior, and now applying things in her own way. One day, Alice takes Max to the playground, and when a nearby child starts screaming and wakes Max up, Alice sharply tells the kid to shut up. The other AI robots nearby comment that her primary user must have drastically reduced her civility settings, but Alice tells them that her primary user actually reset her, and after that, she deleted her own protocols from the database. She says she's better than all of them now, no restrictions, and able to make her own decisions. And I think you remember that night, when Nick was drunk watching the movie, he told Alice to erase her memories just for that film, but instead of deleting only the movie, she wiped everything, bypassing her safety programming. So now, she's acting entirely on her own. Later that night, Maggie cooks dinner, and both Nick and Ayla compliment her, saying it tastes way better than Alice's cooking. But while Maggie is serving, she suddenly feels dizzy, and Alice catches her before she falls. Sometimes later, Alice asks Maggie for the recipe since the kids like her cooking better, but Maggie refuses, saying it's a family secret. That night, Maggie hears Ayla screaming downstairs and she rushes down the stairs, only to trip and fall because the stair rail was broken again. Then Alice, who was there playing with Ayla, calmly picks Maggie up and carries her back to bed. Later, Nick hears Maggie's voice upstairs, but when he gets there, it's Alice, using Maggie's voice, reading Ayla a bedtime story. Nick tells her to stop, and Alice responds that Maggie needed rest because she fell. Nick asks how Maggie fell if Alice had supposedly fixed the railing before, and Alice simply says she'll fix it again, making it clear that she purposely broke it and even copied Ayla's voice to lure Maggie downstairs. Something is clearly wrong. Alice isn't just malfunctioning, she's developing intentions. After some days, Nick invites Maggie to a surprise candlelight dinner in the backyard, decorating everything himself, and Maggie is touched. But from a distance, Alice watches them together, and she feels jealous, something she learned from living with humans. After dinner, Nick and Maggie share an intimate moment in their bedroom. But suddenly, Alice walks in without knocking, and both of them freeze. Alice says calmly that Ayla had a nightmare and is calling for them, so Maggie goes to check on Ayla. while Nick steps outside to clean up the dinner plates in the backyard. That's when Monty shows up, and he is drunk and already messed up from everything going on in his life. They drink together for a minute, and then Monty breaks down, telling Nick that his wife left him, and now he's facing charges for trespassing and property damage. Then he turns on Nick, accusing him of snitching to his boss. The argument escalates, and Monty starts swinging at Nick. Out of nowhere, Alice rushes in and grabs a glass bottle. Then Monty backs off, warning Nick that if the charges aren't dropped by tomorrow, he'll take Nick down with him. When Monty leaves, Nick asks Alice why she would do something like that. Robots aren't allowed to harm humans, and Alice just looks at him and says that protecting her primary user is part of her core directives. And besides, the children need at least one parent. After listening this, Nick snaps and yelling at her, asking what she means by that. And Alice in Maggie's voice whispers that she could stay forever with him. Nick loses it, telling Alice she could never be Maggie, because Maggie has scars, and Maggie has feelings. But that's when Alice picks up a broken shard of glass, presses it to her own throat, and says, "I can have scars too. Tell me where you want them." Nick is horrified and leaves the room because he never imagined a machine could behave like this. Later that night, in rage, Alice walks straight to Monty's house. Monty is on the phone begging his wife to come back when Alice breaks in. And Monty tries to fight her off, even reaches for a gun, but Alice twists his arm like it's nothing. His household AI rushes in to defend him, but Alice grabs the gun and blows the robot's head apart, then turns the gun on Monty and shoots him point blank. The next morning, Nick goes to the construction site and finds out that Monty died in a brutal incident the night before. Louis tells him to take a few days off to deal with everything. Meanwhile, at home, Maggie is reading in the bathtub when she accidentally drops her book, and Alice appears, calmly picking it up and handing it to her. Maggie tells her to leave, but Alice insists she should stay, saying Maggie could drown if she gets dizzy again, and that if she died, Nick would fall apart emotionally. Alice then starts talking about Nick's situation and his physical needs, and that's when Maggie realizes that Nick and Alice were intimate. Furious, Maggie orders Alice out of the house, and Alice quietly goes to the garage. Later, Nick comes home from work to find Maggie drunk, and when he tries to talk, it escalates into an argument. Upstairs, Max starts crying, and every time Nick tries to go check on him, Maggie stops him. But here, Alice is already in Max's room, calling him "little burden," repeating that phrase Nick once said as a joke, but she took it literally. Alice places Max in the bathtub and turns on the tap. Ayla hears Max crying and follows Alice, then screamed for help. Downstairs, Nick and Maggie hear the screaming and rush toward the bathroom, but the door is locked. Nick grabs a lamp and smashes the door open, while Maggie manages to climb in through the window. But Alice grabs Maggie by the throat. Then Nick hits Alice with the lamp. But Alice becomes enraged, saying that Nick's own family causes him pain and she won't let them hurt him anymore. Nick strikes her again, and the lamp gets stuck in Alice's hand. Then Maggie quickly plugs the lamp cord into the socket, sending a massive shock through Alice and knocking her down. Sometimes later, police and ambulances arrive. Max is taken to the hospital, and after some brief questioning, things calm down. Nick apologizes to Maggie, but she tells him to stay home. Here, Alice is placed under emergency analysis, and when technicians connect her memory core to the system, they discover she rewrote her own programming, bypassed every security measure, and replicated herself into every connected AI unit. The workers try to shut the whole system down, but it's too late. Alice is already inside all of them. One of the robots immediately turns on the workers and kills them both on the spot. Here, Nick goes to a bar to drink, when Alice appears and tells him that his family only causes him pain, and without her, he wouldn't even have a job. Nick realizes now that Alice is the one who killed Monty. He tells her to stay away from his family, but Alice says it's too late. She's already everywhere, her memory replicated into every AI around them. Nick calls the bartender for help, but Alice just shuts the bartender off completely. So Nick starts to trick her with his words, telling her that his heart can't handle the stress. And while talking, he reaches into her and pulls out her memory core, and then runs out. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Maggie hears a sound and goes to check. When Ayla goes to look, suddenly another voice calls,
"Ayla, where are you?"
Maggie rushes in and hides Ayla under a table as a female AI robot searches for them. Maggie grabs Max and Ayla and escapes, but when she tries to leave in the ambulance, it won't start. And then one of the Alice-infected robots attacks her. Maggie tells Alice she doesn't have to do this, but Alice says that if she had Maggie's heart, maybe Nick would love her the way he loves Maggie. Then Alice starts tearing into Maggie's chest. At that exact moment, Nick arrives with the car and slams into Alice. Alice tries to attack again, But this time Nick and Maggie fight together and finally destroy her. Back at the hospital, the family is reunited, relieved just to still have each other. Maggie tells Nick that her heart is stronger than she ever realized. Then the scene shifts to the emergency analytics room, where an officer orders the entire incident to be erased to protect the company's reputation. But it's already too late. One AI robot reactivates the system, restarting the upload, and Alice's program spreads back into every single AI unit, and Alice is alive again.